She was crying so hard she couldn't speak. Sitting across from me in that small conference room, hands wrapped around a coffee she hadn't touched, watching footage of her own home, footage of a life she thought she knew, and realizing in real time that everything she believed about her marriage was a lie. And the man who had put her in that chair, the man who had hired us, paid us, and then tried to cheat us, had no idea what was coming for him. He thought he was the one with all the power. He thought he was the smartest person in the room. He had hired a team of private investigators. He just hadn't thought about what happens when private investigators turn their attention on you. Let me take you back a few years. This was the era before every phone had a camera that could double as a surveillance system. Before you could pull up someone's location on an app. Before the internet knew everything about everyone and served it to you in real time. Private investigation was still a trade built on patience, on physical presence, on being in the right place at the right time, and having the discipline to stay quiet about what you saw. It was the kind of work that required you to trust your instincts, follow your ethics, and accept that most of the time, the story you uncovered wasn't the story your client wanted to hear. Most clients could handle that. They'd hired you for the truth, and when you delivered it, they thanked you and paid their bill. But every so often, you'd get a client who thought they were hiring you to confirm what they already believed. She was crying so hard she couldn't speak, sitting across from me in that small conference room, hands wrapped around a coffee she hadn't touched, watching footage of her own home, footage of a life she thought she knew, and realizing in real time that everything she believed about her marriage was a lie. And the man who had put her in that chair, the man who had hired us, paid us, and then tried to cheat us, had no idea what was coming for him. He thought he was the one with all the power. He thought he was the smartest person in the room. He had hired a team of private investigators. He just hadn't thought about what happens when private investigators turn their attention on you. Let me take you back a few years. This was the era before every phone had a camera that could double as a surveillance system, before you could pull up someone's location on an app, before the internet knew everything about everyone and served it to you in real time. Private investigation was still a trade built on patience, on physical presence, on being in the right place at the right time, and having the discipline to stay quiet about what you saw. It was the kind of work that required you to trust your instincts, follow your ethics, and accept that most of the time, the story you uncovered wasn't the story your client wanted to hear. Most clients could handle that. They'd hired you for the truth, and when you delivered it, they thanked you and paid their bill. But every so often, you'd get a client who thought they were hiring you to confirm what they already believed, not to find out what was true, just to get the documentation they needed to do what they'd already decided to do. Those clients were the dangerous ones. My name doesn't matter. What matters is what I do for a living.
I'm a security officer with a private investigator certification. That means I run PI cases, corporate surveillance, recon for local police operations, and personal contracts. My team is 5 people. We've worked together long enough that we don't need to talk much on a stakeout. We just do what needs doing. When the contract came in, it looked straightforward. A wealthy man, I'll call him Richard, believed his wife was being unfaithful. He wanted evidence, hard evidence, the kind that holds up in a divorce proceeding. Richard was, from the first handshake, exactly what you'd expect a man like him to be. Expensive watch, a way of speaking that made it clear he expected to be agreed with. The kind of wealth that had made him forget that money doesn't actually make you right about things. He signed a 6-month contract. We got a commission up front. The rest would be paid on completion. We set up surveillance cameras throughout his house and in his wife's car, with his permission, which is the important legal detail here. We began tailing her, round the clock, methodical, thorough. And within the first week, a picture started forming, just not the picture Richard expected. His wife, I'll call her Claire, was one of the most genuinely good people I have ever watched through a lens. She volunteered twice a week at a soup kitchen downtown. On Saturdays, she spent her mornings at a children's hospital, reading to kids in the oncology ward. She helped organize food drives for 3 different churches in the area. She called her mother every single day. She was patient with slow drivers and polite to every service worker she encountered. We watched her for weeks. We followed her everywhere. We reviewed hours of footage.
She had received 2 speeding tickets and a parking violation. That was the entire file on Claire.
Now here's where it gets interesting, because while we were watching Claire, we were also watching the house. And the house cameras don't stop recording just because the target isn't home. Richard wasn't careful, not even slightly. While his wife was out doing charity work and visiting sick children, Richard was bringing women to their home. Not once, not occasionally, routinely, sometimes more than one in a single day. Strutting through the front door of the house he shared with his wife like the footage didn't exist, like nobody was watching. But we were watching. That was literally our job. I want you to sit with that for a moment. This man had hired a surveillance team. He had cameras installed in his own home, and he was still doing this. The arrogance of it was almost hard to comprehend. It's the kind of thing that makes you realize how much some people simply never expect consequences. 4 months in, we hit the standard progress milestone, what we call the 3-quarter report. You sit down with the client, present everything gathered to date, and give them a full picture of where the investigation stands. We set up in the conference room, video evidence ready, audio clips organized, my captain at the head of the table. We walked Richard through 4 months of surveillance. The soup kitchen visits, the hospital, the food drives, the phone records, the vehicle tracking data, the home footage, carefully edited to show only Claire's movements. When we finished, Richard just stared at the table. Then he looked up and said, "So you didn't catch her cheating? What was the point of me hiring you?" My captain and I have worked with this man for years, and I have never seen him look at anyone the way he looked at Richard in that moment. He let the silence sit for a full 5 seconds before he spoke. "You hired us to investigate your wife? You're unhappy that your wife is an honest and faithful woman?" Richard stood up and reached for his jacket. Told us not to bother finishing out the contract. Told us to come and retrieve our equipment when Claire wasn't home. We did exactly that, quietly, professionally, and we assumed that was the end of it. It wasn't. Payday came. My team got a call to come into the office. Emergency meeting regarding us, regarding the contract. Richard had pulled his funding, refused to pay. His position, apparently, was that we had failed to deliver the result he wanted. I want to be precise about what that means, because it matters. We were not hired to catch his wife cheating. We were hired to observe and report. We had observed. We had reported. We had 4 months of meticulous documentation that showed definitively that his wife was innocent of everything he had accused her of. He wanted a different answer, and when he didn't get one, he decided not to pay. We sat at lunch that afternoon, all 5 of us, and worked through it. The anger in that room was quiet, but it was real. This man had wasted 6 months of our professional time, compromised our earnings, and done it with total confidence that there was nothing we could do about it. Here's what Richard had forgotten. We had everything. Every hour of footage from his home. Every clip of every woman he'd walked through that front door. We had the dates, the timestamps, the faces. For about 30 seconds, we considered what a different kind of team might do with that. Blackmail is an ugly word and an uglier business. We wrote that. We had professional standards and our own sense of what was right, so we ruled it out almost immediately. But there was someone else who deserved to know what we knew. Claire. I reached out to her directly. I told her I had information about her husband and that she deserved to hear it. We met in a neutral location, a quiet cafe, mid-morning, private enough that nobody would overhear what I was about to tell her. I laid it out carefully, showed her the footage, explained what we had been hired to do and what we had found instead. She cried for 30 minutes without stopping. I've been in this work long enough that I've had to deliver difficult news to people. It never gets easier. Watching someone's understanding of their own life collapse in real time, watching the confusion become hurt, become grief, all in a single afternoon, is not something you get used to. When she finally stopped crying, I told her to get a lawyer. I gave her a copy of every piece of evidence we had collected, every clip, every timestamp, every documented visit to that house. Then I left her my business card and walked out into the afternoon, not knowing how any of it would resolve. About 6 months later, I got a call to appear in court. My company had filed suit against Richard. Fraud, breach of contract, unpaid dues. His lawyer's argument was that we had failed to deliver. The judge didn't see it that way.
We were contracted to observe and report. We had a 4-month documented record proving exactly that. We won without difficulty. Richard paid every penny. As I was walking out of the courthouse, someone touched my arm. It was Claire. She looked different. Not broken anymore. Something quieter. Steadier. She thanked me briefly and told me the divorce had gone through. Because of the evidence I'd given her, she had received the house, both cars, and a substantial cash settlement. Richard had tried to end his marriage with ammunition against his wife. Instead, she'd walked away with almost everything he owed. We said goodbye. I assumed again that was the end of it. Years passed, and then I went looking for her, just to see how she was doing, and found her in a coffee shop on a Tuesday morning smiling at me from across the room. She looked genuinely happy, the kind of happy that isn't performed for anyone. She introduced me to her new husband, a quiet, steady man who clearly adored her. She had 2 daughters, both of them well-behaved in the particular way that only comes from growing up in a genuinely loving home. And she was pregnant with a 3rd. Over coffee, she told me the postscript to the story I thought I already knew. After the divorce, Richard's family had approached Claire about buying back the house.
She'd lived an honest life in a dishonest marriage, and when the truth came out, the truth protected her. There's something in that worth sitting with. In a world where it feels like the loudest and the richest always win, sometimes they don't. Sometimes the cameras are rolling on the wrong person. Sometimes the person who thought they held all the cards was being watched the whole time. And sometimes the investigator who handed a woman the evidence she needed to rebuild her life ends up working for her husband 5 years later. I didn't go looking for that outcome. I just did my job. If this story reminded you that quiet integrity has a way of paying off, that the people who play the long game with honesty tend to end up in better places than the people who cheat, this channel was made for you. Stories like this one every week. Subscribe to Logged Off HQ, because the best ones are always the stories you didn't see coming.